Hello and welcome to Simple Time Studios. With this short, we wrap up my Grimmerspace short fiction from the late 2010s as Frozen Memories explored Ark's motivations, Operation Ghost Hotel explores Aila Fireblossoms. Enjoy this story that has been cleaned up for clarity, consistency, and YouTube. Hope you enjoy Operation Ghost Hotel. Beep boop beep boop. Colonial distress beacon detected. Error. No registered colony listed at location. Dispatching nearest Voti Marine Xeno Encounter Unit frigate available to investigate. Aila Fireblossom was quietly performing another maintenance check on her submachine gun as the Zero frigate Thunder and Ashes made its way to the distress beacon. Aila hadn't heard much yet. There was supposed to be a briefing in an hour. All she knew was that her squad of Zero Voti Marines had been dispatched to respond to a distress beacon from a civilian way station, and they would be there before the end of third watch. Hard Voti rock music played in the background as Fireblossom finished reassembling her submachine gun and inspected her armor in the ship's armory, making sure the environmental seals for her Hazmat Recon Mark II armor were functioning properly. The music was hardly regulation, but then Zerus were a little more lax on discipline compared to other branches of the Voti Marines. When it came to anything other than weapon maintenance or conduct within a mission zone, non-regulation music was allowed as long as it wasn't played obnoxiously loud, and there were a handful of other allowances made. And many Voti Marines still regarded Zerus as a punishment assignment. Aila was not most Marines. The red-headed Voti Marine enjoyed the adrenaline put rush that came from facing the unknown and making it known or at least dead. And besides, the short humanoid was a Voti, one of the hardiest humanoids in the galaxy that produced no shortage of hardy humanoids. What could kill her? Continuing to inspect her armor as she put it on over her padded undersuit, she continued to check seals and occasionally adjusted the weight of the alloyed armor to make sure it sat comfortably on her shoulders. The Voti were strong, but it took more than just brute strength to be able to carry a suit of heavy armor and a fully loaded APO, plus other assorted combat gear, for prolonged periods of time. Slipping her gunmetal gray armor on and setting her cybernetic anti-personal ordnance weapon on her right shoulder, she stepped out of the armory with her helmet tucked under her arm. The music stopped playing the moment she left the armory, the room sensing there was no one present. But Aila hardly noticed. She had a briefing to attend, and she was never late to a briefing. "So what's the corpse got for us today, sir?" Choker, Aila's fellow heavy gunner in the squad, asked Axel, the squad leader, as the squad gathered in a briefing room. "Command wants us to investigate a distress signal from a civvy supply depot connecting the core to this part of the frontier," Axel replied. "Proximity to the rest of inhabited space and intel says it's a real frontier mom-and-pop operation," the Marine officer replied, his voice trailing off. Goggles, the team's science specialist, immediately chimed in. "But..." As the science officer of the squad, he was responsible for figuring out what the rest of the team was facing, which, among other things, meant he was often the one asking questions. "But the intel contradicts just about everything else we know," Axel answered, shaking his head. "Everything else we have states the station shouldn't be here. According to the star maps, there isn't a station in this sector. Pioneer battalions are not scheduled to start building one out this way for another month, and long-range sensor readings suggest the station is Adian construction. Big Adian construction, which, political ramifications aside, makes no sense." "Yeah, aren't we on the wrong side of the galaxy to run into those hyper-corporate bootlickers?" Hammer, the squad's tech sergeant and Axel's NCO, chimed in gruffly. "We are," Axel replied simply. "And isn't their supply chain so badly mismanaged that even losing one colony sends their entire logistical network straight down the gyre?" Choker replied. Axel frowned, as much from the situation they were heading into as from the continued questioning. Enough. We have our orders. We arrive on the station within the hour. As a distress call is a generic automated message, we have no idea whether the outpost is suffering from a full assault from unidentified life forms or a simple mechanical failure. Once we arrive and breach the station, our first priority is to determine the nature of the threat and search for survivors, if any. Afterwards, we will either eradicate the threat or contain it long enough to evacuate survivors and extract any intelligence as to exactly who in the gyre these people are. Any questions? Couldn't they just be independent, sir? Aila asks after listening to the others quietly. Not everyone on the frontier belonged to one of the 5 polities or a criminal organization. Even independent colonies need to be registered and logged onto star charts, Corporal. If they're unmarked, they're playing a very dangerous game, Axel replied. Well, sir, can't say the Corps don't send us to some interesting places. A colony that doesn't exist, a threat we don't know, and people we don't recognize. Just another day with zero, Aila Fireblossom sang happily, getting groans from the others in the briefing room. Unlike most of the others, Aila never said that sarcastically. All right, then, that is all. If you have any ideas for operation names, mail them to the ship's server. Otherwise, we arrive at the mission area in an hour. Make sure whatever prep you have left is finished by then. That is all. Dismissed, Axel replied as he concluded the mission briefing. The Voti Marines of Zero Delta saluted and left the briefing room. However, the conversation about the mission resumed the moment they got into the corridor. Briefing's done. Time to open the pool, Goggles smiled. I'll start. Benign equipment failure. 50 credits. Goggles, you always bet that. 100 credits. Alien super predator. Biological, not robotic, Aila replied with a smirk. Awesome! I always wanted to take your money, Choker replied with a laugh. Pathogen that turns people into zombies. 200 credits. Hammer shook his head. You two need to learn not to bet so big. Renegade robots. 50 credits. Goggles shook his head as the 4 of them walked away further from the briefing room and towards the ship's lounge. You 3 are way too eager to get yourselves killed. Is it really that bad to hope for just one mission where Hammer and I are the ones doing all the heavy lifting before chewing out incompetent civvies? What are you going to do with the money anyway? Choker asked snidely as the 4 of them entered the lounge and made their way to the mess unit in the corner. Aila can already see where the Choker was going and resisted the urge to groan. I have plans, Goggle replied, also clearly seeing where Choker was going and not caring at all as he ordered a deli-sliced thunk sandwich from the mess unit. Plans like your plans on that colony world we passed a couple months ago? What's with you and the minor species anyway? Choker replied as the rest of them collected their meals. They're a fascinating oddity, over a dozen sentient species spread out between a handful of worlds after being transplanted to our galaxy by an unknown means. Many of them from different galaxies that never had contact with each other until now. How can you not be interested in them? Goggles asked as the 4 of them sat down in the ship's mess. Oh really? Is that the pickup line you use for that one female? The feline one? The Voti private asked, making Aila shake her head as she tried to remember which species he was referring to. No, actually the line I used was about Voti's stamina, Goggles replied nonchalantly, oblivious to Aila's unspoken questions. Dude, why? Choker whined. Well, you know what they say, once you go furry, you never go back, Goggles retorted, the smirk on his face making it clear that he had that comeback tucked away in his back pocket for a while. If you 2 idiots are done acting like a pair of drunken frats, the rest of us are trying to eat before we check our gear one last time, Hammer replied as he quickly devoured his sandwich and left the mess hall. Goggles was soon behind him, muttering something about making sure his sensors were properly calibrated. It was at that moment that Fireblossom regretted being in such a hurry to make sure her gear was ready to go. Both of the specialists had additional gear to check, leaving her alone with Choker. The younger Voti Marine turned and looked at her expectantly. his mouth starting to open when Aila cut him off. "Did you transfer into Zero Division right out of basic or something?" she asked, her tone dripping with acid. "What?" he asked defensively. "Okay, rule 1 of being in a Xeno encounter unit. Unless you are questioning a squad mate's ability to do his job, you do not pester him about his private life. If you aren't a weirdo when you get here, you will be after your first couple drops," Aila replied before standing up and walking off. Even though she already went through her gear, one more inspection wouldn't hurt. Neither would another couple magazines for her APO either, especially if they didn't run into zombie parasites this time. The final approach to the unnamed space station appeared to be uneventful from Aila's perspective. There was a brief moment as the lights flickered, but the bridge assured them that everything was fine, and it appeared to be just a brief power fluctuation. Zero Delta suited up in their sealed armor and gathered inside the airlock, ready to board the moment the frigate docked. Boarding the station was tense, but entering a hostile mission area was always tense. As the thunder and ashes finished connecting to the docking ring, the inner airlock closed behind the squad and the outer airlock door hissed ominously before opening onto the station proper. Weapons raised, Zero Delta passed through the docking tube and into a large empty atrium, fanning out and each facing different directions. APO swerved idly, and nothing echoed through the room except for the heavy pant of Voti Marines breathing through helmet respirators as Delta Squad waited for goggles to finish his scans. The Voti warrior scientist stared intently at his scientific apparatus until it beeped happily back at him and spat out a report that Aila couldn't make sense of. "Okay, there's atmosphere and it's breathable. No trace of chemical or biological contamination in the air. So whatever happened here, it's not airborne." On reflex, the squad deactivated their rebreathers and were immediately greeted by the unnerving absence of smell. In a confined space like a space station, there was always some sort of smell, whether it be the foul odor of slain colonists killed by any number of horrors, or the cocktail of sweat, chemical fresheners, and cooked food that marked a functional orbital colony. On here there was nothing. Either no one had been here in a long time, or the colony hadn't finished settling yet. "I do not like this, not at all. Fresh Fazorian Automat got more people than this," Choker grumbled as Hammer walked up to a nearby computer terminal in the middle of the empty atrium. "Your opinion has been noted, Private," Axel replied dryly, but Aila could see that even their leader was on edge. Everyone other than Choker had been on enough hostile drops to recognize when something weird was going on, and this was definitely toggling those honed senses. The fact that he picked up on the wrongness so quickly caused Aila to start to reconsider her original opinion of the Private. Sergeant Hammer pulled out his armor's integrated hacking rig and removed a panel from the side of the public information terminal. Drawing an adapter cable, he connected his rig to the terminal as the latter displayed a very officious-looking warning about tampering with colony property. Yeah, same to you, Toaster. The Interplanetary Rescue and Relief Treaty says otherwise," Hammer grumbled as he activated his armor's computer functions, and the information terminal's monitor began to display a string of root commands. "Okay, activating diagnostics and black box retrieval programs, and... What do you mean, incompatible software detected?" Hammer sputtered. "What's happening, Hammer? Talk to us," Axel commanded firmly. "Program architecture is not standard. At all. I can't access engineering or the security archives from here," the tech sergeant replied. "You can't access the encrypted backdoor into the station's network? I thought that security feature was standard after the incident on Visitant 4, Axel replied with a raised eyebrow. "That's what I'm saying. Whoever built the operating systems for this station is not using standard code. If we want to access security files or engineering, I can't do it from here," Hammer explained with a shake of his head. Axel exhaled before replying, an action that was telling in itself. Alright, we'll keep an eye out for the command center while we search the rest of the station for survivors. Delta, let's move out, Axel ordered, gesturing deeper into the station. With their weapons raised, Zero Delta left the atrium and hopefully closer to the bottom of this mystery. As they left the dock atrium for a central plaza that seemed to run the width of the station's central spire, Aila carefully scanned her surroundings and tried to make sense of them. Each of the 5 polities maintained their own way stations to connect the core worlds of the plate to the outer frontier of the crux and to each other. And each station had developed their own unique personality based on who built it, who staffed it, and who was a frequent visitor. Yet even as familiar as she was with each of the polities, Fireblossom was getting conflicting messages about who actually worked here and who they were supposed to serve. The interior of both the plaza and the station in general was painted white, accented with various bright, happy colors. The metal benches were finished with chrome and luxuriously upholstered. It all looked very Fazorian to Aila, but if it was very dumb, lacking the hyper-automation and computer interfacing the green robotics wizard of the Thriftic binary were known for. Charging points for roving mechanical valets and porters, hookups for mechanical waldos and arms. None of that supporting infrastructure was there, or if it was in a form that she didn't recognize. Many of the shops also looked too big for the typical Fazorian automats and self-serve stores. It looked like the stores were set up with living clerks and backroom storage instead of self-checkouts and robotic fabricators that manufactured goods on demand. The engineering decisions looked more like what she had seen in the Adian Combine colonies, but the color scheme still screamed Fazorian. An Adian station serving routes between the Combine and the Fazor's native Thriftic binary could still have been possible, but Zero Delta was on the wrong side of the galaxy for such a combination. Other than that, the plaza looked like a standard way station marketplace, a place for travelers to stretch their legs and pick up various sundries before they continued on. A perfectly ordinary shopping plaza that looked like everyone in the station had all got up and left for lunch just 5 minutes ago. The lights were on, vending machines hummed with electricity, and there was not a soul to be seen except for the 5 Voti Marines. In the center was a secure elevator that would take the squad either down to engineering or up to the command center and residential decks. The squad moved closer, weapons still raised, and fanned out around the elevator as Hammer stepped up in front of the control console and called the elevator. Only then did they lower their weapons and began to relax ever so slightly. "Alright, people, any guesses who built this place?" Axel asked as they all waited for the elevator. "Looks like it might be the robo-wimps from the binary, sir," Aila replied. She wasn't a fan of the Fazorian hyper-reliance on machinery, but their style was pretty distinct. This had to be their engineering. "No way," Choker replied. "Sizes are all wrong. We got furniture scaled up for something like bigger than the average humanoid and some scaled down for a Voti. How many places outside the Votikun Empire do you see cater to our size? I mean, actually cater and not make some sort of token gesture," he countered. It was a good point and the others knew it. But on the other hand, just who made this place then? Ironically, it looks like something the minor species would build if they had the resources to build their own station instead of just use ours. Some of those chairs look like they were the perfect size for the mouse folk. Maybe someone's trying to cater to them? Goggles remarked. Leave it to the science officer to make the observation that made the most sense, even if it still had multiple unanswered questions. "But the miners are dependent on us for construction machinery and heavy industry. If they were building something out here, we'd know it." Joker again, voicing what everyone else was thinking. Aila was just about to respond when a flicker of movement out of the corner of her eye made her raise her submachine gun with a snap and turn in the direction of a small bank of drink vending machines. Yet as soon as she finished turning, the figure vanished. Everyone else turned their heads in their A pose in the direction Aila pointed her gun in. "What is it?" Aila lowered her weapon. "I thought I saw someone for a second," she replied with a shake of her head. She could have sworn she saw a humanoid figure standing by the drink machines like they were about to buy a drink, but as soon as she focused on it, the person vanished. Still, something seemed off about the person she thought she saw. She wasn't sure what. The person didn't stick around long enough for her to get a good look at them. Goggles looked down at his scanner. You sure? Scanner says there isn't anything alive in here except us. The elevator chimed and the doors opened. Axel shook his head. We'll figure it out later. Upstairs, everyone, he replied and motioned for the squad to get in onto the elevator. The elevator ride to the top of the station was uneventful, depositing the squad into the middle of the command center without incident. The station's command center was an open room with terminals and computer banks for various stations surrounding the main elevator shaft. The only walled section was off in one corner with the word Station Master's Office emblazoned in a metal plaque bolted on over the doorway. Moving swiftly and checking for survivors or threats hiding behind the terminals, the squad filed into the Station Master's office. On cue, Hammer got behind a desk, pulled up a chair, and plugged his armor into the computer. Immediately the screen came to life and several programs began to display on the desktop. Odd. The computer was left on. I was going to say, that's a fast crack even for you. What do you have? Running the station diagnostics now. Life support is good. Gravity is good. Reactor is good, though there's a lot of power being drained by something, but I can't tell what yet. Rest of the damn computer's a mess. Whoever ran this station knew nothing about file organization. Also, there's some program called Hardlight EXE that looks like it's been running since we got here. Any idea what it does? No clue. Looks like random bits of bad code crashing, rebooting, and crashing again in one big loop. Program name doesn't tell me much either. LITE? What does that even mean? Axel shook his head. Alright, keep working on it and contact us on comms when you find anything. Choker, stay with Hammer. See if there's any hard copy files and if they're in better shape than the computer. If there aren't, see if you can get a security terminal working and help recover any black box data. Goggles, Aila, you're with me. We're going to search the rest of the station top to bottom and see where everyone went to, he ordered and turned to start walking back towards the elevator. Okay, off into the unknown once more, Goggles sighed. Oh, come on, Goggles. We never got to explore an empty space station before. Aila laughed and started to follow after Axel. I know. That's what worries me. Goggles sighed again as he followed the others onto the elevator and descended down to the top of the residential level below the command center. The station's residential level, where all the employees lived for several months at a time, wasn't particularly large. Aila estimated that at most about 200 people lived here, judging by the size and complexity of the area she found herself in, which continued to reinforce a question that was on her and everyone else's mind. Just where was everyone? They should have run into someone or found a body by now, but the residential level was just as empty as everywhere else they had seen. The central elevator had deposited them into a large atrium decorated with a number of small potted trees and hydroponic flower beds, taking up both floors of the two-level living quarters. Doors lined the edge of the atrium, and a pair of short hallways on each level snaked around the back to form a second block of doors facing away from the central atrium. Judging by how the doors were spaced apart in the long hallways, Aila suspected each apartment was a small dormitory with barely enough space for a bed, a desk, and a fresher. Searching each of them one by one would have been a nightmare if Goggles didn't have his bioscanner actively searching for living beings. Starting on the right side, they swept the dormitories facing the atrium on both floors and walked around to the back of the right side residences. As soon as the three Marines turned around the corner, they spotted a humanoid figure at the opposite end of the corridor. As soon as it spotted them, the figure darted into a nearby dorm. "Hold it right there!" Axel shouted as the three of them raced to the other end of the corridor and turned into the open dormitory to find an empty room. The bed was made, the desk was as neat as a pin, and both the fresher and the small closet were empty. No trapdoors and no maintenance hatches large enough for an adult humanoid to fit in. The three Voti Marines entered through the only way in or out of the room. "We all saw that, right?" Axel asked the other two as they all stood in a room barely larger than a closet. "Yeah, I did. I also saw it didn't show up on the bioscanner. It's not organic, whatever it is. Maybe it's robotic?" Goggles replied with a shrug. "Still doesn't explain where it went. We went through the only door not even we could squeeze into the maintenance duct. It should still be in here," Aila replied as the lights abruptly went off in the corridor outside. Axel was on his communicator as the three of them switched on flashlights attached to the under barrels of their weapons. "Hammer, we just lost lights in the residential deck. Was that you?" "No, sir. I'm still trying to make sense of this computer. There are no logs, and all the manifests date back 3 months ago. Looks like they just built it and left. There's an encrypted folder in the hard drive directory, but I haven't touched that yet. Odd. Sir, remember the junk program that was spitting out random lines of code?" "Yes." "The code. It changed. It went from spitting a few lines before rebooting to spitting several paragraphs at a time before looping around. It's also cycling much faster." "Interesting. Is it relevant? Also, did you track down the power drain?" "I have no idea. Power seems to be drained by some device that spans the entire central cylinder from the command module all the way down to engineering. No idea what it is, though. I don't recognize any of the circuit diagrams Choker found in the hard copy files." "Great. Start working on cracking that encrypted file and remind me to ask for light amplification visors in our next requisition after we finish this," Axel radioed back with a shake of his head before turning to the two Voti with him. "All right, let's search the rest of the residential deck and see if we can't find our ghosts and finally get some answers." The mood became more tense as the three Marines fanned out of the empty apartment and back into the dark corridor. Beams of light cut a swath through the concealing gloom as the trio slowly panned and occasionally turned around to search for their missing figure or anything else that could be lingering in the shadows. Ayla's trigger finger rested ever so gently against the trigger guard of her SMG. Her shoulder-mounted APO and extended up and spun idly with a comforting whine. If there was any danger in here, she was more than capable of greeting it with a hail of gunfire. With Goggles' scanner unable to detect whatever it was that was roaming the station, the three of them were forced to open and search room by room. Each room was the same, small, neat as a pin, and the bed made so perfectly that even Ayla's drill sergeant back in basic would have been impressed. Ready for a small community of station workers to move right in and make themselves at home before bringing the station to life. If it wasn't for the fact that there was something suspicious going on, Aila could see command sending a pioneer battalion to switch to the core and claim the abandoned station in the name of the Vodikun Empire. It looked practically ready to move in as is, everything being as immaculate and recently built as it was. They were halfway through the hallway when Aila Fireblossom encountered the figure. Axel and Goggles had gone in to sweep yet another dormitory while she stood outside and kept watch. Blending into the shadows, Aila almost didn't even see her standing there until it was too late. Recognizing the outline of what looked like a person, she turned her lit weapon towards it, her eyes go wide as the light revealed a monochromatic figure that was completely grayed out and holding a large kitchen knife. Everything about the human woman looking back at her was gray. Clothes, skin, hair. Yet the most horrifying feature about the stranger was her face, or lack thereof. Where the face should have been was almost completely smoothed over. Mouth, nose, and eyes were indistinct like in a blurry photograph. For a second that seemed to stretch into eternity, neither individual moved. Then suddenly the taller woman seemed to come to life and charged Aila with her knife raised. Aila shouted a curse as she quickly raised her weapon and fired twice, once with her submachine gun and once with the APO cybernetically connected to her brain. Her obscenity was drowned out by the short burst of the APO minigun, punctuated by the double tap of her other weapon. Hearing the sound of weapons fire, the other two Voti quickly turned to face the door, just as Aila's attacker doubled over and cried out in pain with a scream that sounded more electronic than natural to the Voti's ear. The alien woman then began to flicker in and out, glitching in a way that reminded Aila of a character in a poorly programmed video game, before disappearing entirely. "Corporal! You good?" Axel called out as Aila walked into the room backwards, weapons pointing in the general direction of the corridor. Yeah, I'm good. I think I am, at least." "Benefactor, what was that?" Aila replied, panting ever so slightly. "I shot it and then it just disappeared." Axel and Goggles looked at each other, then at Aila. "You sure? Corpses don't just vanish." "It vanished. Trust me, I'm not going to forget that anytime soon. Lisa clearly didn't like getting shot. We've got that going for us," Aila replied as she tried to mentally break down what she had just saw. Axel's face was frozen in contemplation. Aila had been on enough missions with him to recognize that look. Their leader was deciding between pulling them out right now or trying to gather more information about what they were dealing with. It was a call that Zero field officers made countless times during their career, and one where there was never a good answer. The lieutenant was just about to voice his decision when their radios crackled with a distraction. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything, sir. Finally cracked the encryption on that one file. Skimming it now while I transmit it to Thunder and Ashes. Say, does the name Nova Marines mean anything to anyone?" Hammer interjected abruptly over the general channel. "Are you asking because it's relevant to the mission, or are you just curious?" Axel replied back. "Just found a file mentioning something about preparing for the eventual arrival of someone called the Nova Marines and..." "Sir, we need to leave now," Hammer replied, his tone implying he was reading while he was talking and found something disturbing. "What, did you find out what happened to the inhabitants?" Axel asked. "Sir, there are no inhabitants. This whole station is one giant Dorkan's gambit," Hammer replied, sending chills down the spines of the rest of the squad. They all knew the story of Dorkan, a sadistic space pirate that lured freighters and free traders into carefully planned ambushes using fake distress calls and convincing decoys. He was so notorious for it that the phrase Dorkan's Gambit referred to anyone that employed similar tactics. Axel sucked in his breath and nodded. "All right, you two get what you can and get out of there. Everyone else fall back. We'll regroup back at the Thunder and Ashes. Once we're all on the ship, we'll atomize this thing so no one else gets snared in whatever we found ourselves in. Everyone stay in radio contact with each other," the squad's leader ordered before motioning for them to move out. Moving out into the hallway and making their way towards the now darkened atrium, Axel stayed on the line with Hammer. "Any idea what we're facing, Sergeant?" "I'm still working out the specifics, but the machine that runs the entire length of the central cylinder and drawing all the power is a projector of some kind. There's a whole lot of engineering jargon I need time to review, and it looks like the station's computer hacked us on approach. I'm currently looking at files on each of us based on our InfoSphere history and online shopping habits. I have no idea what that means, and frankly, I don't want to know. I'm transferring everything I have to the ship right now, and... Wait, Joker? Damn it, Private, this isn't funny. Where did you... Hammer screamed over the channel, his cries punctuated by the sound of gunfire as he shot at something on his end before cutting out. "Sergeant? Come in, Sergeant," Axel called as the trio gathered in front of the elevator. Hammer did not reply. Aila was silent as she looked around and felt a chill run down her spine. In the darkened residential atrium around them, humanoid shapes appeared seemingly out of thin air. Many, many humanoid shapes. More than the three of them could hope to fight off. Fireblossom forgot if it was her or Goggles that slammed their armored fist into the elevator call button like it would make it come faster. Not that it mattered. The ghosts would be on them before the lift finished coming down. With an unholy electric streak, the station's inhabitants charged. The trio of Voti replied in kind by opening fire. Aila's flashlight caught glimpses of long, sharp knives and massive wrenches that were never meant for maintenance. Muzzle flashes from their APOs turned the space outside of their flashlights into a shudder show of collapsing figures and electronic screams. Yet they still kept coming, pushing closer every time the 3 Marines cut them down. Aila swore she killed 4 of the same ones at least twice. The chime of the elevator was drowned out by the sound of battle. It wasn't until Axel shouted at her to get on that Aila realized it had arrived. Turning and running, her APO swerving around to continue firing at the being still screaming at her, Aila raced into the lift as the elevator doors shut behind her. As the doors sealed shut and the residential level outside fell silent, Axel pressed the button to bring the lift up to the command deck. Aila steeled herself as she ready for the fight that was almost certainly coming. Still, they needed to try and rescue Hammer and Choker. Zeros did not leave their own behind if they could help it. And there was still a chance they could rescue their squad mates. The elevator deposited them on the top floor of the station once again, the 3 of them fanning out to see if they could see what became of their squad mates. Sergeant Hammer was found quickly, his dead body lying on the floor mere feet away from the elevator. Several stab wounds in his back and side made it easy to see what killed him. They were still examining Hammer's body when Choker fell out of a utility closet, pushing the closet door open before landing face first on the floor with a thud that made all 3 of them jump. Frowning and moving to a position where he could watch over both Aila and Goggles, Axel stepped back and motioned for Aila to go over and check on Choker. Bracing herself, she carefully walked over with her weapon raised, lowering it as she walked up beside Choker. Even before she turned him over and looked at his face, she knew he would never rise again. Flipping him over, Fireblossom was greeted by the sight of Choker's mauled face. His right eye had been put out where a heavy-bladed weapon was slammed into that side of his face. A huge gash was carved into the left side of his neck, severing several major arteries. "Is Choker all right, Corporal?" Axel asked. "He looks fine for a dead guy, sir," Aila replied dryly as she looked over her squad mate's corpse. While forensics was Goggles' specialty, Aila had been in enough fights to have a rough guess how the private met his end. Lured into breaking the first rule of Zero and wandering off alone, one of those damn ghosts probably lured him into a false sense of security and struck him down with a large knife to the neck and a meat cleaver to the face. Goggles would have to be the one to prove it, but Aila was certain that Choker was the station's first kill, the squad falling down one after another after that. Axel shook his head and collected the ID tags Hammer and Choker wore around their necks before stowing them in a metal box worn on his belt. Carrying their bodies would have been difficult even without the constant threat of being attacked by an enemy that seemed to be infinite. Their dog tags would have to suffice. Once Goggles finished his medical scans, the trio returned to the elevator and began their descent. For whatever reason, the station did not attack them, something that did not dawn on them until they were on their way down. Aila didn't know why that happened, but she was certain whatever intelligence controlling this place wouldn't have made the same mistake twice. The atmosphere in the elevator car as the squad rode down to the market plaza was tense. Both Aila and Goggles frantically reloaded their weapons and quickly glanced at how much ammunition they had remaining. Axel was on a channel with the Thunder and Ashes, telling them to be ready to disembark the moment the squad returned to the ship. Fireblossom wondered why the 3 of them weren't attacked as they stood waiting in the elevator car. It was small, they couldn't fire effectively without hitting each other, and they were all out in the open. Yet here they were safe for the moment. Did it have something to do with whatever Sergeant Hammer was going on about before he was ambushed? And if there was no one living on the station, then what were they shooting at? "Command is going to go insane trying to figure this one out," Goggles groaned and shook his head, clearly thinking along similar lines. "I think I already have. The machine Hammer was talking about. It's spitting these things out at us. Only parts I can't figure out are the program, Hardlight EXE, and the data breach. Of all the things it could walk off with, the computer went with seeing what kind of porn we downloaded and what we bought off the infosphere, Axel replied. Wait. Light? Of course. It's not supposed to be LITE. It's supposed to be LIGHT. Sir, the program's name is a typo. Light? We're fighting holograms? Goggles asked and then thought about it for a second. Well, that would explain why they look and die like badly programmed video game characters, but I thought that tech was still theoretical. Or at least no one managed to make hollows solid enough to react to a bullet yet. I hope it's a typo, Corporal, because if I lost 2 people to a pun, I'm going to find out whoever built this place and rip their teeth out with my bare hands. Still, even if you're right, that doesn't explain the data breach, Axel replied, tapping his finger against the outside of his trigger guard as the elevator finally arrived at their floor. The instant the 3 of them stepped back out into the marketplace, the lights came back on, and not a single hostile could be seen anywhere. Indeed, the marketplace had become much livelier since they were last there. Holographic advertisements had been activated to tempt the 3 humanoids with a variety of products. Still, there was not a single living employee or robotic cashier to be seen anywhere. Well, sir, this probably explains why the station's computer wanted our browser histories, Goggles explained dryly. I'm not even going to ask which one of you looked up things like Madame Satine's silken tea house when you were off duty. Computer must be busted if it thinks we're going to fall for this after what we saw upstairs, Axel snarled as he motioned for them to keep moving. At Axel's command, they moved, keeping close together as they swiftly moved through the bright lights of advertisement glistening at them. Aila kept an eye out for one last ambush. The marketplace was designed to facilitate the quick exchange of goods and credits between large groups of people. There weren't many places where the 3 surviving Zero Marines weren't exposed from multiple angles or could quickly make a stand if they needed to. There were plenty of ways for them to get rushed with the exit in sight, and plenty of space for the electric ghosts to hide among the advertising. Yet the team almost made it to the exit before it happened. Closer, the 3 of them were practically through the door when it happened. One moment, Axel was running right beside Aila. The next minute, he fell over dead, the back of his head charred and sizzling from an energy blast that came from somewhere behind them. Fireblossom turned, weapons raised and her blood boiling as she hungered for one last chance at vengeance. But whatever killed her commander had vanished back into the bright lights of the plaza's advertisements. Corporal, come on, we gotta get out of here, Goggles shouted. With everyone else dead, he was the acting CO on the ground. Aila paused just long enough to grab Axel's dog tags and the container on his belt before following after Goggles. The run through the docking atrium to the safety of the Thunder and Ashes was short and bittersweet. There was no danger. Apparently whatever was attacking them couldn't reach them past the plaza. But Delta Squad returned to the Voti Empire frigate much smaller and traveling much lighter than when they went in. Goggles was already on the ship's comm as the airlock door shut behind them. This is Warrant Officer Stonecutter to the bridge. Reporting completed assessment of the station. Affirmative, Stonecutter. What is the status of the rest of your squad in your assessment of the station? Corporal Fireblossom and I are still mission capable. The rest of the unit they're gone, sir. Station is overrun with hostiles, unable to pacify and reclaim with available assets. Recommend detaching and targeting the station's reactor with the ship's weaponry. It's the only way to be sure. For a moment, there was silence. Then a mighty rumble as the ship detached from the station, and the Zero vessel Thunder and Ashes resorted to its other option when fighting the horrors of the galaxy. Bombarding it to ash. Zero Delta had completed its mission.